My name is Marcus, and I need you to understand something about corporate America that they don't teach in business school. Excellence doesn't guarantee recognition when your skin is darker than the boardroom walls. I'd been at Steinberg and Associates for 7 years, working my way up from junior analyst to senior project manager. My performance reviews were impeccable, top 5% every quarter, client retention at 94%, team productivity increased by 37% under my leadership. Numbers don't lie, but people do. The promotion to Director of Operations was supposed to be mine. Everyone knew it. Hell, even James, the CFO's nephew, who'd been there 18 months, admitted it during happy hour. "Marcus, man, you've got this locked down," he'd said, raising his beer. "Nobody else comes close." But that Tuesday morning in November, everything shifted. I walked into the conference room for our quarterly review, and the atmosphere was different. My team, 5 people I'd mentored, protected and advocated for, avoided eye contact. Sarah, who I'd recommended for a raise just 3 months ago, was furiously typing on her laptop. David and Tom whispered in the corner. Jennifer studied her coffee like it held the secrets of the universe. "Morning, everyone," I said, setting down my presentation materials. Silence. Richard Steinberg himself walked in, followed by HR Director Patricia Chen and 2 board members I'd only seen in annual reports. My stomach tightened. This wasn't a quarterly review. "Marcus," Richard began, his tone professionally cold, "we need to discuss some concerning feedback about your management style." I straightened in my chair. "I'm not aware of any issues. My team's performance metrics are aggressive," Patricia interrupted, reading from her tablet. "Intimidating. Creates a hostile work environment. These are serious allegations from multiple team members." The room spun slightly. I looked at my team, and saw Sarah finally meet my eyes for a split second before looking away. In that moment I knew they'd coordinated this. "Who made these allegations?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "That's confidential," Patricia said, "but we take workplace culture very seriously here." Richard leaned forward. "Marcus, your technical skills are undeniable. But leadership requires more than numbers. It requires the ability to create psychological safety for your team." Psychological safety. I'd heard that phrase before, always directed at black managers. Never at Bill Harrison when he threw a laptop at an intern. Never at Craig Matthews when he made his assistant cry weakly. "Can you provide specific examples?" I asked. "Dates, incidents, anything concrete?" Patricia shuffled papers. "On October 15th, you raised your voice during a meeting when our biggest client was about to walk because David missed 3 deadlines," I said, looking at David, who suddenly found the wall fascinating. "I said we needed to fix this immediately. That's not aggression, that's urgency." "Perception matters," Richard said. "On October 22nd, you questioned Jennifer's analysis in front of the team. Her calculations were off by $2.3 million. Should I have let that slide?" Jennifer finally spoke, her voice small. "You could have pulled me aside privately." "I did," I said, fighting to keep my composure. 3 times. "You ignored my emails, so I had to address it in the project meeting before we presented incorrect data to the client." Tom cleared his throat. "Marcus, you have to admit you can be intense." Intense. Another code word. When Brad Thompson screamed at a vendor on a conference call, he was passionate. When I firmly stated a deadline, I was intense. "Additionally," Patricia continued, "there are concerns about your approach to team building. Several members feel excluded from your inner circle." "Inner circle?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean the lunch group, the one I invited everyone to join every single week, the one Sarah said was not her scene and David called too urban." David's face reddened. "I never said that." "October 3rd, 12:47 p.m. outside conference room B," I said. Would you like me to pull up the security footage? Richard raised his hand. That won't be necessary. Marcus, we're placing you on a performance improvement plan. For the next 90 days, you'll report to James Morrison as interim director while we assess your fitness for leadership. James Morrison, the same James who'd admitted I deserved the promotion. 27 years old. 15 months at the company, CFO's nephew, and now my supervisor. This is about the director position, I said. It wasn't a question. This is about creating the best environment for our team, Richard replied, but he couldn't meet my eyes. I looked around the table. Sarah, whose son I'd written a college recommendation for. David, who I'd covered for during his divorce. Tom, whose gambling problem I'd kept quiet. Jennifer, who I'd trained from day one. And now William, just walking in late as usual. The only other black face in management, giving me a look that said he knew exactly what this was. I see, I said, gathering my materials. May I have these allegations in writing? That's not our policy, Patricia said quickly. Of course it isn't, I stood. I'll need the PIP documentation by end of day. Marcus, Richard called as I reached the door, this doesn't have to impact your future here. Show us you can adapt, and doors will open. I turned back. Adapt to what exactly, Richard? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I walked back to my office, my former office, as I'd later learned James had already measured for new furniture, and sat at my desk. 7 years, perfect reviews, countless overtime hours. Training their nephews and friends' kids, fixing their messes, making them look good to their clients. My phone buzzed. A text from William. Conference room C, 5 minutes. I found him there, staring out at the city skyline. William had been at the company 12 years, the first black senior manager they'd ever had. Stuck in the same position for the last 6. They got you too, huh? He said without turning around. How did you know? Same playbook they used on Terrence 3 years ago. Remember him? Best analyst we had. Too aggressive. Now he's selling insurance in Newark. William turned to me. They need us to hit their diversity numbers. But God forbid we get too close to real power. My own team, I said. The betrayal still fresh. I helped build their careers. That's exactly why they did it, William said. You were getting too successful, making them look bad. So they offered your team something, promotions, raises, who knows, to take you down. Sarah's getting your job, by the way. Heard it from Patricia's assistant. Sarah, who couldn't run a pivot table 6 months ago, who I'd stayed late teaching advanced Excel to, who cried in my office when her son got arrested, and I connected her with my lawyer cousin. What do I do? I asked. William smiled sadly. You survive the 90 days. Keep your head down, document everything, and start looking for an exit. This place will never let us rise above a certain level. I learned that the hard way. But as I walked back to my desk, passing Sarah's celebratory whispers with Jennifer, David's smug grin, and Tom already moving his belongings toward my office, I made a different decision. They wanted to play corporate games. Fine. But they'd forgotten something crucial. I'd been keeping receipts, 7 years' worth, every racist comment, every ethics violation, every financial discrepancy I'd covered up to be a team player. They thought they'd broken me. They had no idea what they'd actually done. The performance improvement plan was a masterpiece of corporate passive aggression. 47 pages of requirements that would make a Navy SEAL question his abilities. Report to James every morning at 7 a.m. Submit daily productivity logs. Attend cultural sensitivity training. The irony wasn't lost on me. Complete all of this while maintaining my regular workload, now with James's overflow assignments added on top. James moved into my office the next day. I watched from my new cubicle, yes, a cubicle, as he hung his Harvard MBA on the wall where my community service awards used to be. "Marcus," he called out cheerfully. "Got a minute?" I walked into my former office, noting he'd already replaced my ergonomic chair with some designer piece that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. "I want you to know," James said, feet up on the desk, "this isn't personal. It's just business. The board thinks fresh perspective is needed." "Fresh perspective," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling nepotism now?" His smile faltered slightly. "Careful, Marcus. That attitude is exactly what got you here." "No, James. What got me here was being better at this job than anyone else and making the mistake of showing it." He leaned forward. "You want some advice? Real talk?" I said nothing. "Play the game," he said. "Smile more. Be less intense. Maybe joke around more, loosen up. People think you're too serious." "People?" "The team. They're more comfortable with someone more approachable." "Like you?" "Exactly." He missed the sarcasm entirely. "Look, I like you. Marcus, you're smart. Scary smart, actually. But intelligence isn't everything. Sometimes you have to make people comfortable. Especially people like us. I mean, people in leadership. People like us." He'd almost said the quiet part out loud. That evening I stayed late, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was what I was doing. Copying 7 years of emails, documents and files onto encrypted drives. Everything I'd been too professional to use before. At 9 p.m., security made their rounds. It was Joe, the night guard I'd known since I started. "Working late again, Mr. Marcus?" "You know me, Joe. Can't help myself." He lingered by my cubicle. "Heard about what happened. Heard." "That ain't right, what they did." "You heard." "I hear everything," Joe said, lowering his voice. "Been here 23 years. Seen this happen too many times. You're the fourth one." "Fourth?" "Fourth black manager they've pushed out this way. Always the same story. Too aggressive, not a culture fit. Needs coaching." He shook his head. "Mr. Terrence, Ms. Washington, Mr. Abdul, now you. All of them were the best at what they did." "What happened to them?" "Terrence sells insurance. Washington moved back to Atlanta. Abdul—" Joe paused. "Abdul documented everything, took them to court, settled out of court for enough to start his own firm. They made him sign an NDA, but—" He tapped his nose. "Like I said, I hear everything." After Joe left, I pulled up Abdul's LinkedIn. CEO of his own consulting firm, 32 employees, major contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies. His profile photo showed him smiling in a way I hadn't smiled in years. The next morning, my 7 a.m. meeting with James was postponed to 7:30, then 8, then cancelled altogether. He was hungover from client drinks, clients I'd brought in, relationships I'd built. Sarah stopped by my cubicle around 10. "Marcus, can you review this proposal? I want to make sure it's accurate." The proposal was for the Mitchell account, a $3.2 million contract I'd been nurturing for 8 months. Sarah's name was listed as lead manager. "This is my proposal," I said. "I wrote this 2 weeks ago." "Well, yes, but James asked me to take point on it now. You understand, with your current situation." "My situation?" She shifted uncomfortably. "The PIP. James thinks it's better if I handle client-facing work for now." I looked at her, really looked at her. 6 months ago, she'd cried in my office because she didn't understand basic project management. I'd spent my weekends teaching her. Unpaid, unrecognized. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" She nodded nervously. "What did they promise you?" "I don't know what you mean." "To throw me under the bus. What was your price?" Her face flushed. "Marcus, that's not—" "We had genuine concerns about—" "Save it," I said, turning back to my computer. "The numbers in Section 3 are wrong. You're using Q2 data for Q3 projections. The client will notice. Or don't fix it. Not my problem anymore." She grabbed the proposal and practically ran back to her desk. 20 minutes later, I heard her on the phone with Jennifer panicking about the numbers. I could have helped. The old Marcus would have helped, but I was done being their safety net. That afternoon, Patricia called me in for my first PIP review. Her office was a shrine to corporate buzzwords, posters about synergy, diversity, inclusion. The irony was suffocating. "Marcus, James says you were late to your morning meeting." James cancelled the meeting. "I have the email. He says you were uncooperative when Sarah asked for help. I pointed out errors in her proposal, the one she stole from me." Patricia's lips thinned. "Marcus, this attitude isn't helping your case." "What attitude, Patricia? The one where I don't smile while being robbed? The one where I don't thank them for the opportunity to train my replacement?" "You're being dramatic." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo I'd taken that morning. The whiteboard in the break room where someone had written "Angry Black Man Bingo" with squares like raised voice, didn't smile. Too direct. Made me uncomfortable. "Is this dramatic?" I asked. Patricia's face went pale. "Who did this? Does it matter? Will there be a 47-page PIP for them?" "Marcus, I'll look into this." We both knew she wouldn't. That evening, I met William at a bar downtown, far from the office. He was already 3 drinks in. "You know what the worst part is?" he said. "It's not even the racism. It's the gaslighting. Making you think you're crazy for seeing what's right in front of you." "Joe told me about Abdul," I said. William's eyes sharpened. Abdul was smart, documented everything, every racist joke, every passed-over promotion, every mysterious disappearance of his ideas that showed up in white presentations. He pulled out a business card. "His lawyer. Keep it." "You think I should sue?" "I think you should protect yourself. They're building a case to fire you for cause. No severance, no unemployment, and a bad reference to destroy your career." He signaled for another drink. "Unless you build a better case first." The next week was a masterclass in corporate sabotage. David accidentally left me off crucial emails. Tom scheduled meetings during my lunch break, then reported me as absent. Jennifer submitted my work under her name. And James was the worst of all, taking credit for deals I'd closed, relationships I'd built, strategies I'd developed. But something else was happening too, something they didn't notice in their feeding frenzy. The Mitchell account contacted me directly. "Marcus, what's going on? This Sarah person doesn't know basic terminology. She tried to sell us services you know we don't need." The Rodriguez group called. "Is everything okay? James Morrison just pitched us the exact opposite of what we discussed." 3 more clients reached out. Confused, concerned, some even insulted by the sudden incompetence. I documented every call, every email, every complaint. And I started noticing other things too. Discrepancies in the books. Tom's expense reports that didn't add up. David's vendor kickbacks. Jennifer's falsified credentials. Sarah's plagiarized certifications. They'd been so busy orchestrating my downfall, they'd forgotten I'd had access to everything for 7 years. I knew where all the bodies were buried. The morning of my 30-day PIP review, I arrived to find my cubicle emptied, my belongings in a box by the door. "Oh, Marcus," James called out cheerfully. "We're moving you to the basement office, fewer distractions for your improvement work." The basement office was a storage room with a desk, no windows, flickering fluorescent lights, 1 electrical outlet. I looked at the box of my belongings, 7 years reduced to a cardboard container, and something inside me crystallized. "Thank you, James," I said, picking up the box. "This is perfect." His smile wavered at my tone, but he shrugged it off. In that basement office, surrounded by old files and forgotten equipment, I began building my case. Not just about racism or wrongful termination, about fraud, about embezzlement, about violations that would interest the SEC, the IRS, and the state attorney general. They thought they'd buried me. They had no idea they'd just given me the perfect place to dig up everything. My phone buzzed, an unknown number, but I recognized the area code, Atlanta. Mr. Johnson, this is Robert Chen from Chen and Associates Executive Search. We received your resume and are very interested in discussing an opportunity. It's a Chief Operations Officer position with a company acquiring several firms in your industry. The hiring committee specifically requested candidates with your background. My background. Yes, they're particularly interested in your experience with Steinberg and Associates. They're looking at acquiring several companies in your sector and need someone who understands the landscape. I looked at my basement office, at the boxes of evidence I'd been compiling, at the 7 years of expertise they were trying to steal from me. I'm interested, I said, very interested. Excellent. Can you fly to Atlanta this weekend? Discreetly, of course. Of course. As I hung up, I realized William had been wrong about one thing. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about justice. The Atlanta trip changed everything. Chen and Associates had set up a meeting with Prometheus Capital, a private equity firm that was quietly acquiring consulting companies. The moment I walked into their boardroom, I knew something was different. The CEO was a black woman named Diane Foster, the CFO, an Asian man named Richard Liu, the head of acquisitions, a Latino man named Miguel Santos. For the first time in my professional life, I wasn't the only one. Marcus, Diane said after I'd presented my analysis of the mid-tier consulting market, we're impressed, but we're curious about something. Why would Steinberg's best performer be looking to leave? I'd prepared a diplomatic answer, but looking at their faces that had probably heard the same diplomatic answers throughout their careers, I decided on honesty. I told them everything. When I finished, Miguel leaned back. Steinberg and Associates is actually one of the firms we're considering acquiring. My heart stopped. But, Diane added, we've had concerns about their corporate culture and some irregularities in their financials. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that? I thought about the evidence in my basement office. The falsified contracts Tom had been submitting, the vendor kickback scheme David ran, the inflated billable hours Jennifer had been recording, Sarah's plagiarized credentials she'd used to win contracts. I might have some insights, I said carefully. Richard Liu smiled. We thought you might. Here's our proposal. Come work for us as Chief Operations Officer. Help us with due diligence on these acquisitions. And when we acquire Steinberg, he paused, you'll oversee the integration. The integration? Deciding who stays, who goes, and in what capacity, Diane said. We believe in keeping talent, but we have zero tolerance for unethical behavior or toxic culture. They offered me 3 times my current salary, equity, and something more valuable, power. I flew back Sunday night, my offer letter encrypted on my phone, my mind racing with possibilities. Monday morning, day 45 of my PIP, I arrived at my basement office to find James waiting. Big day, Marcus. He was practically glowing. The board's reviewing your progress. Between you and me, it's not looking good. I appreciate your honesty, James. He laughed. Come on, you had to know this was coming. A guy like you in a place like this. Oil and water. A guy like me. You know, aggressive, chip on your shoulder, always having to prove something. It's exhausting for everyone. I recorded every word. That afternoon, Patricia called me for my review. The conference room was full. Richard Steinberg, the entire board, my former team. And surprisingly, William. Marcus, Richard began, after careful consideration of your performance improvement plan progress. Before you continue, I interrupted, pulling out my phone. I'd like to submit some additional documentation for your consideration. That's not how this works. I connected my phone to the presentation system. I think you'll want to see this. The first slide showed Tom's expense reports, the real ones versus the ones submitted, a $47,000 discrepancy. Tom went white. The second slide, David's vendor kickback scheme. email trails, bank records, signed confessions from 2 vendors who'd agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. David stood up. This is illegally obtained from company servers I had legal access to as a senior manager, I said. Next slide. Jennifer's falsified credentials. The real Jennifer Morrison had died 3 years ago. Our Jennifer had stolen her identity to get her certifications. Jennifer, or whoever she was, ran for the door. Security, who I'd asked Joe to position outside, stopped her. Should I continue? I asked. Sarah was crying. Marcus, please, please. I pulled up her plagiarized certifications. Like you pleased when you lied about my management style? When you took credit for my work? When you wrote Angry Black Man Bingo on the break room board? Gasps around the table. Oh, you didn't know about that? Here's the security footage. Sarah, David, Tom, and Jennifer laughing as they fill in squares. There's even one labeled "Played the Race" card for when I asked why I was the only manager without an office window. Richard Steinberg looked like he'd aged 10 years. Marcus, what do you want? Nothing from you. I've already accepted a position elsewhere, but you should know the SEC received copies of these documents this morning. So did the IRS and the State Attorney General. You vindictive, James started. Vindictive, I laughed. No, James, vindictive would be mentioning your cocaine problem. Funded by embezzled client entertainment budgets. Vindictive would be sending the video of you calling Richard Steinberg a senile old fool to the board. Vindictive would be forwarding your texts about which female interns you wanted to, how did you put it? Break in. James lunged at me. William lunged at me. Surprisingly quick for his age, stepped between us. You're done here, Richard said to me. Yes, I am. Effective immediately. My lawyer will be in touch about my severance package, the hostile work environment lawsuit, and the wrongful termination claim. You were on a PIP, a discriminatory PIP, based on fabricated complaints from employees who were committing fraud. How do you think that plays in court? I gathered my things, what little was left in the basement office, and headed for the door. Then I turned back. Oh, one more thing. Prometheus Capital will be in touch about the acquisition. Richard frowned. What acquisition? The one where they buy this company. I'll be handling the integration personally. We'll be conducting individual interviews with every employee about their role in the company culture and any unethical behavior they've witnessed or participated in. The room erupted. Accusations flew. Sarah pointed at David, David at Tom, Tom at Jennifer. James stood frozen, calculating his exposure. William followed me out. That was beautiful, he said, but you know they'll try to destroy you. They already did, I said. The man they destroyed would have quietly taken it, maybe sued for a small settlement with an NDA, but they created someone else. Someone who keeps receipts. 6 weeks later, the arrests started. Tom, first, for embezzlement, David for fraud and tax evasion, Jennifer for identity theft. Sarah avoided jail but lost her certifications and faced massive fines. James was the biggest surprise. Turns out his uncle, the CFO, had been using him to hide a massive insider trading scheme. They both got 5 to 10. Prometheus Capital acquired Steinberg and Associates for 30 cents on the dollar, their reputation destroyed, their biggest clients fled, their best people poached by competitors. My first day as Chief Operations Officer of the newly acquired firm, I walked into the executive conference room, the one where they'd ambushed me 8 months earlier. The remaining staff had been gathered for the announcement of the new structure. I stood where Richard Steinberg had stood. Good morning, everyone. I want to be clear about something from day one. This company has a new culture now. One based on merit, ethics, and genuine diversity. Not the kind you put on posters, but the kind you live every day. I looked at the faces, some relieved, some terrified, some confused. For those who embraced the old culture of discrimination, fraud, and toxic behavior, your time here is over. For those who were victims of it, or who stood by feeling powerless to change it, you have a second chance. Use it wisely. Joe, the security guard, now head of building operations with a 200% raise, smiled from the back of the room. We'll be conducting individual reviews over the next month. Be honest, we already know more than you think we do. Loyalty to corruption is not loyalty at all. After the meeting, I stood in my new office, Richard Steinberg's old office, looking out at the city. The same view, but everything else had changed. William knocked and entered. I'd convinced him to stay as Senior Vice President of Transition Management. "You know what the ironic part is?" he said, joining me at the window. "If they'd just given you the promotion you earned, none of this would have happened. They'd still be stealing, still be discriminating, still be destroying careers. Their racism was their downfall." "No," I corrected. "Their assumption that I'd accept it was their downfall." My phone buzzed. Another message from a recruiter, another black professional from another company, asking how I'd done it. The word was spreading. The playbook was being shared. I thought about Marcus from a year ago, perfect reviews in hand, believing excellence would be enough. He wouldn't recognize the man I'd become. The system had tried to break me, make me smaller, force me to accept less than I deserved. Instead, they'd taught me the most valuable lesson of my career. When they refuse to give you a seat at the table, sometimes you have to buy the whole restaurant. Sarah, now working as a receptionist at a small firm across town, sent me an email that afternoon. "I'm sorry," was all it said. I didn't respond. Some bridges are meant to stay burned, but I did forward it to the 23 other black professionals who'd reached out to me, all facing similar situations at their companies. The subject line read, "They always are, once there are consequences." The revolution wouldn't be loud. It would be precise, documented, and executed with the same excellence they'd always demanded from us, but never rewarded. In my desk drawer, next to my new business cards reading Chief Operations Officer, I kept one thing from my old cubicle, a printed screenshot of the angry black man bingo board. Not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of victory. They'd filled in every square trying to diminish me. Instead, they'd given me the winning card.